Hello everybody, I'm here with Tony Sedgwick and we're at the Biotech conference. Can you tell me more about what is going on today?
Yeah, well thanks you for the lovely Tillin for interviewing me and being here really. We're at what's called the Creative Disruption Forum, and it's an idea that I created with my co-pilot, who's called Combe, several years ago, and the idea is to try and bring more entertainment, education and interaction together. So I think my general feeling has been over the years that conferences in technology are a bit passé, a bit boring, and that people really come along for networking, but the content is quite boring. So the idea was, how could we create something more interesting? So we came up with this idea of creative disruption, because it's creative, it's disruptive, and the format really is one of light engagement. So we encourage people to participate and not to spend their time looking at the phone, because who wants to look at a phone? It's hardly boring. And the other thing, of course, is with the way that our brains are being wired now through the algorithms of the phone, is people's attention spans are very low. And so if somebody gives a diatribe of conversation, everybody falls asleep. So this is an anti-sleeping meeting.
Amazing. So today we're gonna talk about biotech, about AI, about technology, about chemistry and the industry of pharmaceuticals. And we're gonna speak with a lot of interesting speakers from the industry, and let's dive in.
Exactly, and I think the landscape of technology is extraordinary, but I think the complexity of who wants to buy what and keeping up with it is very difficult. So I think what you'll see today is a lot of different perspectives. The idea always is to go from the big picture to the practicalities of boots on the ground. You know, what are the jobbing entrepreneurs doing, and how are they raising their money, how are they competing in today's market? And the big thing that is always big to me is, how do you differentiate something in a market which is so saturated? It's got so many things, you know, everybody's got an algorithm, everybody's got everything. So how do you know that that's the place to go, and that's the format? So we're looking forward to it. Hopefully you'll enjoy the meeting, and thank you for this discussion.
Super, Tony. Hello, so I'm here together with Combe. He's also one of the organizers, one of two. Graham, can you present yourself in a few sentences, please?
I'm Combe. I work in the life sciences area. It's in the innovation part of life sciences. So quite often with the university spin-outs and other companies, we work in the very early stage of the life science cycle, which is typically companies that have got seed funding or Series A, you know, up until then, and we hope that one day they go into big companies. So we're working mainly with the business leaders. They can be CEOs, CSOs, R&D directors. We talk more about strategy than we do about the science itself. But you know, everybody's welcome basically to come along.
So it's about the early stages, it's about the early rounds of fundraising. But today, this conference is about biotech.
Yes.
What are we about to see today?
Well, it's about the UK life science industry. There's a lot of expectation over the next kind of 10 years that there's going to be a lot of growth in this area. So we're going to be talking about the finance, how this can happen, you know, what the governments are doing right and what they're doing wrong, and what we expect from and what we need from VC financiers and other financiers. So that's really the focus of today, and to see where we really are. We try and make it real. And so we do these events with Chatham House rules so that people can speak openly and be themselves.
Amazing. I'm together with Lauren Kossy from CDD. Can you tell us more about your company and about today's conference?
Sure. Like you said, I'm Lauren. I work in the business development side of CDD, which is a commercial web-based platform that essentially organizes, stores, and helps manage scientific data both internally and externally, chemistry and biology, which is really exciting. And they've been helping scientists streamline research for the past 20 plus years. And we've recently pushed into the AI and deep learning space, which is really exciting. And part of the reason we're here today and sponsoring this event is to hear from thought leaders in that space as well.
Amazing. Anything else to add?
I think we're good to go. Just excited to be here.
Super.
Look at what we've got here. I think we've got a huge amount of experience. 10,000. Whether we like it or not, that's what we've got to live with it. And then we've got to flourish in it. So how do we flourish?
I'm here with Andy Craig, and he's the author of this amazing book, Our Future is Biotech. And he just had an amazing speech about biotech and how it's shaping the future of our world. Can you tell us more about what we just heard on the stage?
Sure. Well, I mean, the main thing about the speech was around the challenge. Well, firstly, that biotech's extremely exciting. You know, the last century was about physics. The next century will be about biotech. I think that's actually quite easy to evidence. You know, that sounds like a kind of throwaway statement. I think it's quite easy to evidence for all sorts of structural reasons. You know, the fact that sequencing a genome has fallen in price over the last like 25-ish years, exponentially faster than Moore's law has gone up. So biotech exponentials are more exponential than tech exponentials, which makes it a huge investment opportunity. But one of the other big themes I was talking about today is the extent to which funding of the whole sector, notwithstanding how exciting it is, funding of the whole sector outside of the United States is really challenged, and what we can do about that. Basically.
So where do you see opportunities for the European biotech or other innovative companies?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if we, you know, one of the big points I make is that ultimately, although funding is really challenged, commercial delivery is the one thing that means that you resolve that problem. Because if you get enough businesses get through and launch a product, or have a fantastic drug or a fantastic medical device, they start making money. And when you start making money, it's much easier to raise more capital, and so then that supports the whole sector. So I think there are a lot of British and a lot of European companies that have really struggled, and they've kind of run on fumes from a capital perspective for a long time. But I think there's a certain inevitability of just commercial delivery and businesses making amazing technologies and drugs and whatever else that means that these problems will hopefully go away, at least to a certain extent.
Great, Andrew. One more question. Since we are in the age of the AI, it's the big buzzword in everybody's mind. So what can you tell me about the future, maybe a cross-section between biotech and AI?
So AI and biotech are incredibly synergistic. There's real convergence there, because basically as we get down, you know, you can sequence a genome, and that's like X billion pairs that, you know, down at the level of DNA. In order to understand what that actually means and what you might be able to do therapeutically. So there's a whole load of things that are coming along at the same time. Firstly, we can do it. Secondly, you really need AI and machine learning to interrogate all that data. It's exabytes of data, and it's the available set. Every time somebody does a genomic analysis of a plant or a bacteria or a fungus or a human being, that it grows this huge data set of exabytes of data. And to get in it and say, what does that actually mean? You know, does that mean this person was predisposed to get breast cancer? Does it mean that they might get early onset dementia? You need to interrogate just a vast amount of data, and like a few clinicians in a lab can't really do that. Exactly. But the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle actually is so you can analyze it, you can get the data, you can analyze the data. What can you then do about it? And the beautiful thing is that as of a few years ago, we now have this technology called CRISPR, where you can then actually you can do gene editing, so you can make the changes to fix the problem that you've interrogated using AI and machine learning. So it's an incredibly exciting time to be alive, hopefully.
Let me ask you, Andrew. So what are the main reasons for this change that we are now turning from the tech century to a biotech century? Is it only because of the aging, because the demographics has changed, or are there any other reasons behind it?
The sort of point I made in my presentation is that human beings, I mean, a lot of people forget this, right? Particularly anti-capitalists. They forget that we create economic value by solving problems, by actually dealing with human wants and needs, delivering whether that's products or services, it doesn't matter. And so the biggest value is created when you solve a big problem. So, you know, whether or not you believe the smartphone solves the problem, lots of people think it did. It solved,
longevity, it's a big problem.
Longevity is a big problem, but you know, a lot of the problems tech solve, like air travel. That's a big multi-billion-dollar problem that we all would love. You know, it's great that we can now fly to another country relatively inexpensively. So that's why the aviation industry has come from nowhere a century ago to be very valuable. But all of the problems for the next century are problems of biology: environmental degradation, therapeutics, longevity, you know, and so much else. So that's where the
and I was so amazed by the few numbers that you shared with us in your presentation. You told us that biotech, which is a huge sector, is growing at approximately 12% per year.
So the point the point I was making there is actually that's the very biggest bits of biotech. So specifically the examples I used were cancer drugs, which is a multi-$100 billion market, and also what are called CROs, contract research organizations. So those are two, you know, $100 billion plus markets, and even they are growing at 13% per annum. The really exciting bits of biotech that are the cutting edge of innovation, and I gave, you know, CRISPR and microbiome and surgical robotics and liquid biopsy and all these different things. Those are growing, 3D printing. Of, you know, eventually we hopefully print organs and all that, and all that sort of stuff. But those really cutting edge areas of innovation are growing at more like 20 to 30% a year.
Andrew, why is it worth to read this book?
Well, yeah, I'm going to plug my own book, but so I talk about three reasons for actually, you know, three tangible things you get out of the book. First is that information about kind of all things medical and healthcare is pretty poor, and so understanding a lot of these big themes could be really helpful for your health and your mental health. So there's a lot of stuff in there. It's a little bit personal development, but it's like self-helpy. It's like cold exposure and microbiome and all this sort of stuff, probiotics, whatever. So there's a lot in there about improving your health and mental health. The second thing is that this should be something that you should be considering from your investments, because if the US stock market's done 10% returns annualized for a century because of tech, underpinning all of that, and I think you should try and have biotech exposure of some kind for the next century, you know, as you get older. So that's investments. And the third thing is it will cheer you up. Because it's a really positive and empowering way of looking at the world. I think we have a very strong inherent negative press bias. People think the world's the worst it's ever been, and they're factually wrong. The world's extremely good, and it's likely to get better.
Okay, and this is going to be really the last question, because I know you're an amazing financial advisor. You've been for 20 years. Yeah. It says so on your website, so I checked it before. So let me ask you, what are some financial advice, let's say related to the biotech, to this conference today, that you would like to share with the viewers?
Yeah, so I mean,
so invest more in biotech, because it's going to grow.
And let's be clear. So whenever, you know, strictly, I should never give financial advice because unless you know somebody's personal situation. But what I am comfortable saying, which I say at the end of the book, is actually pay attention. But in order to benefit from tech, you didn't need to invest in Microsoft, Apple, whatever. You just needed to own a big global stock market. So if you owned the world equity market or the US stock market, you would have benefited from tech directly from owning the tech companies, but also because all the other companies like airlines and restaurants, whatever, are all using tech. And so it's the same with biotech. So what I am comfortable saying is a big picture, all somebody needs to do to have exposure to this is to own a big global equity fund and make sure they invest in that regularly throughout their lives. And that's kind of, I think that's true of whenever you think about investment at all, but you will benefit from the value created by biotech if you do that.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Andrew.
Thanks for the
processes, and is supported by various platforms like this and others.
So I'm together with Markus Gershater. He's the founder of the Synthace. And can you tell us more about what do you do as a company? And also about the future development in the area of biotech, and then later on we can transition to the AI.
Okay, so so Synthace is all about running the most powerful and impactful experiments to explore the complexities of biological systems. So fundamentally it's about thinking about all the dimensionalities which are important to consider in any biological system, because biology is hugely complex. It's got a real dependency on many, many different components interacting in maybe unpredictable ways. So if we want to investigate it properly, we have to do experiments of a power and sophistication that matches, right? And so what Synthace does is it allows a scientist to design very, very powerful experiments. It then converts those powerful experimental designs into all of the details of exactly how you're going to run those experiments in the lab, and then makes the automation instructions so that then the scientist doesn't have to do it by hand, right? They can use the very powerful automation in the lab to make those experiments happen, and then bring the data together, which is then going to give them much better insight into what's happening in that biological system than they'd have otherwise if they're doing kind of more traditional manual experiments.
So it's actually a digital platform that enables and speeds up the processes of how you set up the experiment, how you manage the experiment, and how you organize all what is needed for experiment.
Yeah, in the end, there's only a certain level of complexity that a human brain will be able to handle when they're thinking about how to set up and run an experiment. And so essentially, this Synthace software can help sort of raise the ceiling on what's possible in an experiment and allow you to get much better and more definitive results, even in very, very complex biological situations.
Okay, next question. Where do you see the future of biotech? Because we heard some speakers today and they said that biotech is the future. Biotech is the 21st century, as was the tech or digital tech in the 20th century. They also showed us some numbers that biotech it's about to rise on 12% on a yearly basis and so on. So it's also a good investment opportunity. But where do you see the development of biotech? Because you are a player in this industry.
Sure. I mean, fundamentally, biotech can address the most pressing problems that we have in the world today, right? So whether it's to do with making enough food or medicines or materials, right? It's a science which can help make the most sophisticated solutions that you could hope for these kind of global problems. So without a doubt, there's the opportunity there for biotech to become a really massive and impactful force for humanity. And if you look at the pace of innovation in biotech now as well, then that's now bringing a lot of these promises to fruition, right? So the speed at which we're able to do biological research is going up exponentially. And then similarly, we have other technologies which are then coming into the space. So we've already spoken about automation, right? But then there's also ever more sophisticated software in the form of machine learning and AI that can then combine as well to really help us make progress in this space where it's historically been just so difficult to make good and reliable progress, right?
And that's my next question. Where do you see the AI and machine learning and the related technology is headed to? You can also relate it to the biotech industry, but maybe for just the beginning of this question, let's stay in general terms. Let's talk about AI. What's the impact of it on the science industry?
Right, so I mean, AI is an absolutely massive concept, right? And it actually encompasses so many different things which are hugely diverse, right? So to talk about it all in one lump is always quite challenging. However, there are, very clear advances. So if we think about LLMs in the space, that's probably the area which has been most clear to people on a day-to-day basis about how much they're impacting our lives. And similarly, that impacts biology in biotech in the same way. Biology is such a complex system. It's not really human understandable in a lot of its features, right? It's not something which you will naturally be able to intuitively think about a lot of the time. So of all disciplines, AI has the most promise, I believe, within biotech over and above everywhere else. That's my own personal opinion. And we can already see where it's having dramatic impacts, say, in the drug discovery value chain, but just that impact is not uniform, right? So it's been very effective at solving some problems, but then there's other areas that are now becoming those bottlenecks which now need to be resolved. So AI is very good at coming up with new hypotheses, new potential drug targets, for example, which could then be the basis of new drug discovery programs. But then there's still a huge amount of work that has to go into actually then developing those drug discovery programs around those new targets, for example, right? And there's still the wet lab work that has to be done. There's still, just a huge amount of different data which has to be generated and brought together in order that each one of those programs can make progress.
So could you imagine a future, let's say in 20 years from now, when almost all of the stages of, let's say, drug discovery or lab work are fully automized, also in terms of AI and also in terms of robotics applications that are then physically implemented in the lab?
I think that you've hit on the two kind of aspects which will have to come together, right? You need some way of posing the question, right? Posing the hypothesis, framing the problem, right? So there's going to be some interaction between AI and human researchers there, right? And then those problems have to be investigated somehow. So they have to be distilled into an experimental design, which has to be then transferred into those instructions, which are going to actually be carried out in the lab. The lab then has to then run those things and generate the data to come back round in a loop. And there's no reason why in future that couldn't become a highly automated process, right? The challenge with that is the sheer diversity of lab-based work that needs to happen for it all to be automated, right? So I think there's going to be a long intermediary time where there's kind of a sort of hybrid approach, right? You'll have a bit of automation which the scientist uses to do the very hardest parts of their experiment, to do the most heavy lifting, but then they'll still be carrying stuff around by hand and actually interacting with the machines in the lab before it then ultimately might become fully automated. I think you said 2 decades from now, right? And so I could imagine that in the more distant future, right? But for the time being, I think there's just huge amounts of benefit to be had from automating those bits that make most sense to automate, right? To generate those data sets. And it all comes back to the data in the end. At the heart of whether it's automation or AI, at the heart of it is data, right? You need the high quality data to train and refine the AI in the first place. And then the automation should be set up in such a way that it's just contributing the highest possible quality data that you can possibly have. So that's the heart of all of it. Yeah. And in all the debate that we talk about new technologies and that kind of thing, that's the thing that should ground us and really help steer us for the future.
Yeah, interesting answer. I do agree with it because the quality of data is one issue, and another issue is definitely is the environment in which the AI or robots as a physical machines should operate. Is it a structured one or is it an unstructured environment?
Right.
That's why we also see a lot of industrial robots, but not as much domestic robots.
Right.
Because your home is different to my home.
Yeah.
But whereas warehouses and factories around the world are quite similar.
No, I understand what you mean. And I think for biology, it's really important
it's a complex environment.
It's very complex, but it's also very important that we define exactly what we want these systems to be doing and what we want. Because otherwise, given the scope and complexity of the data sets, then it'd be very easy for them to identify hallucinations essentially within those, unless we're very, very precise about the things that we're asking and very precise about the data that we're producing, right?
Yeah. Fun fact. Last week I was at the Alan Turing Institute and I've spoken with many interesting researchers, but one of them was from University of Nottingham, I think.
Okay.
And what they are doing is they are doing retrosynthesis.
Yeah.
It was also very interesting to talk to him. One last question. What is maybe one question that I didn't ask you, but I should. I should have.
Wow, that's always a tough one.
It can be related to your company or to the field of biotech in general.
I think it's been
some personal advice.
I think it's been a good overall thread, right? I mean, it's about essentially what we're looking to do is we're trying to find solutions within biology, right? And biology is the most complex phenomenon in the known universe, right? It's
physics, chemistry, biology.
It's just off the charts in terms of its sheer complexity and the way that it's likely to be utterly unintuitive to humans beyond a certain point. right? And so it makes perfect sense for us to be using these new technologies to supercharge the space. And we've also spoken about obviously the massive potential that the space has for doing good, right? And we were talking about investment returns and all that kind of stuff, and obviously that's an important part of it. But fundamentally, the vast majority of biologists are not in this. They didn't get into it for investment returns, right? They got into it because they have a passion for trying to solve really tough problems, right? Whether that's curing people of disease or producing enough food to feed the world or whatever, right? And that's what's really exciting for me, is we've got these new technologies which aren't just sometime in the future. They're right now having an impact, and they're helping to address some of the biggest problems that we have in the world today.
Okay, but this is really the last question, I promise. You see, I come from Slovenia. I studied in Germany. Are you from Germany?
So my mum was Swiss, which is where Markus comes from.
Yeah, because of the surname. Yeah. Okay, so I've seen those two countries throughout my life. Now I'm in London, in the UK. You are in the biotech. Do you see, as an entrepreneur, that those countries differ in terms of automation of their processes? So if you compare labs in Slovenia, let's say, or in Germany, and you compare them to the one here, do you see differences?
Okay, so I have no experience in Slovenia.
Okay.
In terms of labs in sort of Western Europe, I guess, and in the US, they're largely at the same kind of
automatization.
Yeah, exactly. They largely have the same amount of automation, and they've all made the same progress and the same mistakes, right? And so there are a lot of pitfalls to automation, and often people just see it as something that can solve all problems, which it just can't, right? And so where there's been too high a hopes put on it, where there's been too much ambition for any particular project, then that can line that project up to be that much harder to actually fulfill on. What I've noticed is where people have really kind of defined goals and they look for those quick wins which they can then build on, that's where there's been much more effective automation, irrespective of where it is.
So you have to be specific where to deploy AI.
Yeah, AI and automation, I think there's a specificity to it. Going back to the original points we were talking about, AI is such a broad thing to talk about, then the only way we can talk about it meaningfully is by talking about very specific problems and the way that we might address them.
But Markus, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
A lot of smoke and mirrors, what do you see?
No, that's an interesting question because one...
So we're still at the conference. With me is Joel.
Yeah.
And he's from the company that does machine learning and AI in Cambridge.
Yep.
But he's gonna tell us more about what they do.
Yeah. So I work for Intellegens, and we are a company from Cambridge. We span out of the university, and our technology is we allow you to apply machine learning to your data, and then you're able to get data-driven insights. So the idea is to try and do experimental design faster by using the data that you've curated over many years. We're very keen in developing new technologies and bringing that to people through easy-to-use software. And that's pretty much why we're here today, to tell people more about what we do.
Okay, first question that I gotta ask you.
Yep.
Is AI hype?
Yep.
Or is it real? Does it have as much substance as they portray it in the media?
Yep.
Or do you see it as a bubble at the moment? Let's talk about AI in general first.
Yep. So machine learning is obviously a type of AI. It's been around for tens of years. Everyone's been using it. And recently, and before that, it was called statistics. And recently, it's been rebranded as AI. We've been doing it before language models was a thing, and we're kind of hyped up. And that was delivering value through just using classical machine learning techniques. Do I think AI is hyped up? No. I think it's the future. I think it's going to make everything easier. It's going to lower the barrier to adoption. It's going to make it easier to use complicated tools through a natural language interface that then lowers the barrier to adoption to everyone. It's going to lower the barrier to coding, which is going to accelerate more research and development. It's going to make complicated tools more explainable. So I think the net is just going to be better for everyone to use these tools. I think everyone's worried probably about AI tools taking their job, but it will be working alongside you to deliver better insights faster.
Okay, Joel, let me ask you, a very specific question. I come from Slovenia, which is a small chicken-shaped country in the middle of the Europe. Only 2 million people live there, but it's very similar to, let's say, Austria, also to the northern parts of Italy and so on. So let's have a business case now. Let's say that I'm the owner of a small or medium-sized enterprise. What are some concrete steps that I can take in order to implement AI and other advanced programs into my workflow or into our processes?
Obviously, being a software company, I'm kind of biased, so I would say, if you don't have the skills in-house to develop the AI technology, outsource it. It will be cheaper in the long run and quicker. And then you can build up the skills straight away. Data is key, so having some data means you can use these technologies. Machine learning can typically work with very little data if you know how to set it up. So you can get started with very, very little. Obviously, you need some data to do something, so you need to be sitting on some data. But then if you use, say for example, you need to know what the end goal is. So using software that someone else has already made kind of teaches you what the end goal looks like. And then once you see the end goal, you can then do the formatting on the data to actually kind of get there. But until you know what you're trying to achieve, it's kind of like, I want to use AI. So it's a bit catch-22, but I don't think you need to do a lot to adopt these technologies. And we see more and more kind of like small teams, small startup teams coming to us because they don't have the big research budgets. They don't have a huge amount of people to do that. And every single experiment they do, they need to be careful with it, and they need to make sure that they do the right experiment.
Hey, one question that is always interesting, especially for people who have small children right now at the moment. What would be some advice that you would give to them? How should they approach knowledge? How should they teach their kids? What is important in the age of AI? And let's say we're talking about children that might be 8, 10 years, 11, 12 years old at the moment.
I think having good domain knowledge about a specific subject is useful. So if AI starts automating tasks, they'll automate things which are repetitive. But it will take longer for them to automate things with domain knowledge. So building up a domain knowledge in a certain subject area is going to be really beneficial. Then learning to able to use these tools, because they're not going away and they're just going to be there. So AI works as an assistant. So maybe your kids will be even smarter now than they would have been 10 years ago, because they have effectively like Einstein in their pocket all the time to ask them queries and questions. So I would adopt ChatGPT, for instance, start using that straight away, and there's more and more of these tools coming out, and they're just going to make people smarter and smarter. Like every generation before, things come out, the computer, the calculator, the internet, all these things have just made people smarter and have to do less laborious tasks.
So domain knowledge, use the existing tools. What else? Invest a lot of time into mathematics. Logics.
So try and pick a subject that you like and then try and see how you can maybe integrate these tools. I'm seeing more of these things called like agentic workflows. So there's going to be lots of tools and things called agents, and they're effectively, you're going to have interfaces to be able to deploy technology easily, to do automated tasks. You're going to see them more and more on your phones. So I would learn how to use these tools. And also maybe it's good to have a bit of knowledge of coding, because otherwise you're always going to be restricted to the people who make you the tools. But if you understand a little bit how to do these, you can in theory have a language model write you a piece of code, and then you can stitch code together. But you can't stitch the code together unless you understand the syntax. But you don't have to be an expert, you just need to know enough to be able to stick it together. So maybe eventually you won't need any tools to do that.
We're not there yet.
But
Let me ask you about, you mentioned AI agents.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about them? And also, where are we headed when we talk about them?
So AI agents they use a language model. So language model is the base, and the language model understands the kind of what the user wants to do. And then everyone who's used a ChatGPT interface will know that they have to put information into the kind of context window before they run the query. So giving the language model the right information at the right time means it gives a better answer, and it's less likely going to hallucinate. So there's a big thing at the moment where these language models are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and more people are focusing on doing the first bit, which is giving it the right information at the right time. So given a query, it could be like, what does this thing mean? The language model understands the query relevant to the context, it finds the information, pulls it in, provides you an answer, and then the agent would then say, what would you like me to do next? So I would like to book a holiday to Slovenia, and then there's a bunch of steps to do that, and the language model would be, the agent will be built specifically for that goal, and would provide an output which would be hopefully booking the task. But then those agents can communicate to each other.
So have you already tested this Manus agent, agentic AI?
I haven't, I've read about it.
Okay. It's supposed to be amazing.
Really good, yeah. So I haven't tested that one, but I've been looking at, like co-scientists, and that's like a team of 6, I think it's like a team of 6 agents.
Okay.
And they all, for research.
Okay.
And they all like have specific work, so it's one like, gathering some information, another one's like curating new research ideas, and they're all communicating, talking to each other. You leave it running just like a team would, and you come back in the morning, and it's come up with like new hypothesis for your question.
I understand that.
So,
in a way it's similar to, is it in a way similar to Notebook LLM?
What do you mean, sorry?
This is also one AI from Microsoft. It's called Notebook LL, and you can. So, on the dashboard, there are 3 sections. In the first section, you can import all the links that you want. You can import PDFs, your own documents, documents from Google Drive, and so on. In the middle part of the dashboard, you have the instructions. You write the instructions. Let me do this and that. And on the last section of the dashboard, there is AI who does all the hard work. And it synthesizes together all the information. And the main difference between this AI and, let's say, ChatGPT is that the first one, it's supposed to be credible source, It's supposed to be trustworthy.
So it sounds like that is...
And it also enables you a conversation, live conversation, But also ChatGPT offers that. So
so at the moment, I think ChatGPT...
trustworthiness.
ChatGPT builds the agents for you. So when you ask it a question, they'll have an agent to search the internet, and they'll do that behind the scenes. It sounds like that is allowing you a little bit more flexibility to build, build your own agentic workflows. So it wouldn't be too long until you would build that workflow. Maybe I haven't actually used it, but maybe they would allow you then to publish that agent. You could build another agent, and then you could get them to communicate in an interface. So that's what I'm saying. It's you build a bespoke workflow to solve one particular problem, and then you build another one, and then they can communicate. That's going to be the agentic workflow. I've seen it a little bit in like funds, when you had multiple people working on different parts of like a hedge fund, and they all do different jobs, and then they bring it together to provide an answer on what to invest.
But let's shift our focus now for 1 minute to completely ordinary people. Like my parents and similar. They might be an expert in some field, but they're definitely not experts in the AI. What could they do on a daily basis? What can they do on a daily basis to become more ready for the future, so to say?
Trying to educate themselves with at least high level of what these technologies mean. And if you think about AI as just software, so when you hear AI, someone said it earlier, it's quite good. When you hear AI, replace it with the word software, and then it's not so scary. It's just new software. It's just slightly more automated than the previous software. And that's it. And just expect, if something's laborious and it's repetitive, it's probably going to get automated. So, and just have that mindset, then it's not so scary.
I understand you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Health company, what have you. So that's 1, that's 2, that's those 2. And this one.
So we're together with Nadia. She's a trade advisor to the Danish embassy here in London. And the first question, she was also a speaker today, is how do you see the development of life sciences and also related to the advancements of the AI?
Oh wow, there's so many amazing developments in life sciences. I think where the critical element is that we are now moving beyond our knowledge around chemistry and biochemistry into diving deeper into the knowledge of biology. And that is also a big challenge in that, because biology is more complex to understand because there's so many different factors. There's some aspects is less linear compared to chemistry and more circular. And with this challenge in system biology and any biological sciences, it can be a great benefit to apply AI to that, to this complex data collection, to make sense of it. So it's really fantastic time to be evolving in this intersection between AI and life sciences, for sure.
Okay, great. Today you talked about the reasons for the success of the Danish companies.
Yes.
If I understood you correctly, Danish state was able to create a sustainable environment, ecosystem, in which all levels, from the universities, research, up to the companies that compete on the market, everything is like in order, so to say.
Yes.
How does it look like?
So just to be clear, it wasn't the state that created it, it was created from businesses. So it's not the state intervention, it's a business-led approach. And it started off with actually this foundation model structure actually it comes from Carlsberg, the beer manufacturer, I think in the late 1800s, when the generation shift was thinking, how can I preserve my family business for the future family? Then he created a foundation model. And in Denmark, the legal element, the taxation element was sort of created to enable that. So in that sense, the state was involved. But now it is very much this underlying foundation model is very much what has enabled Danish pharma to be such a stronghold globally, although Denmark is only a small country with 6 million people. So for example, the most renowned foundations is of course Novo Nordisk Foundation, but then you also have Lundbeck Foundation and Leo Foundation in the sector. And the way these foundations are governed is that they own the pharmaceutical companies completely. Although some of them are listed companies, like Novo Nordisk is listed company. Leo is privately owned, so it's not listed, although it has a PE supporting them as well. Whereas Lundbeck is also listed, and they're listed within the Danish stock exchange. So the combination of being listed companies while still having the majority share owned by the foundation enables the companies to manage the corporate development pathway as part of the R&D strategies, as well as corporate development strategy, within the interest of Denmark and keeping the Danish values within the companies. So one specific example is that back in 2003 or 2004, Serono, a Swiss company, was due to merge with Novo Nordisk. So this was at the back with a lot of different big mergers. AstraZeneca had just happened a few years before. Whilst things were in alignment in terms of scientifically and sort of business growth agendas, the Danish foundation stopped it because they were not in agreement with Novo Nordisk headquarters being moved to Switzerland because they wanted to keep it in Denmark. So because of the ownership structure, they were able to stop the Novo Nordisk Serono merger, and Novo Nordisk were maintained in Denmark. So now, where are we at almost 20 years on, Novo Nordisk has grown significantly. It's now the biggest pharmaceutical company in Europe. In terms of revenue, it actually produces, in essence, it provides the same revenue as AstraZeneca and GSK combined. And it's still, the profit is, because the ownership is the foundation, the profit goes obviously to the shareholders, but also back to the foundation. And the foundation is able to produce feedback into the Danish ecosystem. So one big example is simply the quantum infrastructure that's built in Copenhagen, thanks to this foundation. But also another big contributor is that the foundation has gone and collaborated with other big foundations like the Gates Foundation and the Wellcome Trust Foundation to tackle big health challenges globally. On the other side, you have the Lundbeck Foundation as well that has just last year invested in a big infrastructure project with Aarhus University to enable brain research to be done with cutting-edge technology in a transdisciplinary manner. And again, in a way to prevent, or in a way to understand how can you prevent the disease to happen, rather than just focusing on treating the disease at the end of the sort of pathological development of the condition, but trying to look early on and see how can you leverage AI, or how can you leverage other sort of technologies into understanding the brain image, understanding cellular mechanism, understanding all the various different disciplines around biology, into combining that with both finding treatment and, more importantly, finding prevention methods as well. So that's the two of the major ones. And of course you have got the Leo Foundation as well, that actually, come to think of it, it was actually Leo Pharma who originally funded or put the money towards creation of the Novo Nordisk company. So when the insulin was isolated, to be able to produce this technique, or to sort of scale up this technology, Leo Pharma was the company who had the financing to enable that to happen and create the I can't remember the name of it now.
Don't worry.
To create what came to be Novo Nordisk. So this sort of biotech culture that exists in Denmark, from its managed to maintain the sovereignty of the various innovations, was also drive the scientific agenda in terms of understanding the conditions and solving the conditions, and also working to improve the impact on the world and human health of what the discoveries may lead to. So it's a very interesting sort of both private and public partnership model that is very much commercially driven, to be able to have sovereignty over your corporate development. And this model, of course, is to feed Danish biotech infrastructure and ecosystem, but more and more, as now the biopharmas are global, and biotech doesn't have national borders. They also invest in international companies, and they're also interested in working in providing health solutions for international health needs. So this is great to be part of today's event with British biotech communities and CEOs and various very interesting companies, and see where possible we can create collaborations with the Danes and the British scientist communities in as part of this transition between into more complex life science challenges.
Okay, one more question. It can be really short. Where do you see the development of AI?
Yes.
Do you want to comment on it?
Yes.
How do you see it?
Development AI. AI is just a tool.
Okay.
It's not the full science.
Okay.
So I have studied AI as well as a scientist.
Okay.
And I've also worked with driving growth for businesses who have AI in their business models. And ultimately, AI is a bit like electricity. If you connect up your operations to electricity, then you have the power to push it forward. And I think, in essence, AI is a bit like that.
Okay.
In the sense that the power of AI is that it can digest information quicker. And I think that is particularly valuable for biological sciences, which ultimately is more about volume of information that are interrelated as opposed to just a titration of a chemical reaction.
Okay.
So when you have complex interactions of multiple factors creating multiple outputs, that's a lot of information to digest, and AI is effectively the power to understand that in a capacity that our human brains cannot do in that speed, and enable us to either create predictions or analysis or interpretations or however you apply the technology. So it's very, very exciting times to combine the two. And for that, of course, you need the power behind that, which effectively is quantum, which again, looking back at how insulin 100 years ago was sort of...
You mean quantum computing?
Yeah, so quantum computing again this is why the Danish sort of life science community have heavily invested into that, because they know that will bring it to the next level.
Yeah.
And again, this is an investment that obviously you don't have a return within 3 years or 5 years,
but it's
sort of a long term.
Yeah.
And it's obviously an expense up front to take in consideration. But because you have this compound effect of through generations and through decades of reinvesting into the ecosystem, then the ecosystem is able to bear that initial cost for the flourishing of the long-term value of the ecosystem.
That's the Danish model.
That's actually the Danish model.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. So I'm together with Tom Lazenby, and he's the founder of an interesting company. Can you tell us more about it? What are the problems that you're trying to solve, and what are your solutions, and what are also your clients?
Yeah, of course. So the company is called Mayet. That's M-A-Y-E-T, just so people can understand the saying of it. We typically work with clients who are outsourcing research services in order to deliver clinical trials or lab-based trials, focusing on delivering good vendor services. So our software enables those clients to keep all of their vendor information in one place, and also to use the workflows in order to manage quality, compliance and delivery of those service providers as well, all under the one roof of our software, which enables all stakeholders who have a viewpoint into the different processes to be able to do what they need to do and have access to the right information.
Super. Okay, the next question, and if I forget something, you can just jump in, okay? So the next question is, how do you see the progress of AI? And you can relate it to your own sector, which is biotech and life sciences, pharmacy, or you can talk just generally about it.
Yeah, I mean, day to day, I use AI products quite a lot. I think most people use the large language models like ChatGPT and Claude AI. That's one of my new favorites anyway. It increases productivity massively. I think one of the things that I always think about that someone told me a while ago is that they are like very, very advanced versions of predictive text in your phone. So the idea is that you should already have a good idea of what the answer you're expecting to get from the tool actually is, so that you're able to properly fact check what you might use and what you might not use. In terms of in the life sciences sector, there's some incredible things being done. I think there's a lot of good regulatory guidance now coming out as well from like FDA and the EMA, for example. And companies just have to obviously be aware of what their responsibilities are when they use AI tools as part of their drug development processes, and also being aware of what the right tool for the right job is as well.
So to be specific.
Be specific about what you're selecting as an AI tool.
What you're solving for.
Yeah, what you're solving for, and also understanding what the what the regulatory requirement is for understanding how that tool works and can you explain it? Because when we go through the process of bringing a drug to market, if there's a step that's not explainable of how you got that result, how you got that answer, that doesn't look favorably by regulators or by, for example, if a large pharma company was acquiring a biotech, they would want to know, like, how did this AI product work for your company? So those are my areas of kind of caution, but also advice.
So I know it's not a business question, but it's, I think, very important question nevertheless. Let's say you have a son or a daughter who's like 11, 9, 10 years old. What would be some advice that you would give to such child? What are some steps that he or she should do on a daily basis?
In life or in business?
No, in AI.
In AI.
Yeah.
I think
you can also answer it for the business.
I mean, it does go for every area. I think with using AI, I think you have to always fact check.
Okay.
So like, don't ask for an answer. So I asked ChatGPT the other day which company was invented first, Walker's or Lay's crisps, because they're the same brand, they're actually part of the same brand, and it said that one was invented before the other, but it said it was invented in 1948, but the one that was invented after it was in 1932. But that was obviously completely wrong and illogical. So obviously fact checking is a huge thing. Also like proprietary or personal information, so like don't, if unless you're paying for a closed wall system, don't put personal information into the system.
But in a way, we all do that.
But well, we do that with Instagram or Facebook. We give away our data all the time with all the cookies and things that are involved with that. But I think what we don't know with AI now, especially with the open models, is where our personal data is being used or not used.
Exactly.
Because the models are always learning from everything that we've put into them. So that would be my definite don't do.
So if you do put all of your data in, it will be so easy to manipulate you. That will happen nevertheless.
But I mean, if you talk to somebody about frying pans, and then all of a sudden 10 minutes later you've got adverts for frying pans coming up on Instagram or something like that. That's what part of data.
Okay, so you talked a lot about security and how to protect yourself. But what are, if you can do now a call to action for such an individual, for such a kid, is she or he should be using AI tools on a daily basis?
Absolutely.
Or is there any other approach? Is mathematics and logics and programming very important?
I think they should be using them as much as possible.
Okay.
My personal advice, just mainly because children are curious and they're always wanting to ask questions, and now they have like almost an imaginary friend that has a lot of good answers that they can talk to again and again and again.
In their natural language.
In their natural language. So, be curious and just keep asking those questions, because the more we learn faster at a younger age, the faster like new technologies and the growth of knowledge in the human race, I guess, is going to expand massively, I think.
Maybe the last question. You have a Slovenian co-founder.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about it? Because I'm from Slovenia. I'd like to know.
Of course. My business partners are from Ljubljana in Slovenia. We met through the Y Combinator startup co-founder matcher. I had an idea and they were looking for a new project. They have a software company that's nearly 20 years old now, and they were looking for a new project to build and to get on the startup journey with, and that's how I met them. I've been to Ljubljana twice.
Amazing.
Beautiful place, Lake Bled, Lake Bohinj as well, incredible places. So yeah, that's my my Slovenian co-founders.
You've seen all the best places.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any other questions that I should have asked you?
No.
No.
It's been a pleasure. I can't. If you keep asking me questions, I'll keep talking, and we'll be here until it goes dark.
Exactly. Well,
thank you so much.
Hi. I'm together with Victor Higgs. He started a company about a very interesting to solve a very interesting problem. But first, I would like to ask you, what is the background story of this company? Why did you start in the first place?
Hi, my name is Victor Higgs. I'm the CEO of Applied Nanodetectors. And we're working on improving the diagnosis of respiratory disease like asthma. And also, once you're diagnosed, we want to improve the management and stop people having asthma attacks and stop people dying of respiratory disease. So the motivation behind that is, unfortunately, my mother died a few years ago. And it took a long time for her to be diagnosed. And then when she was diagnosed, she was on wrong medication. And that's when I realized it's a global tragedy. There's something like 500 million people globally suffering from respiratory disease. There's about 100 million people undiagnosed with COPD. So once you're even diagnosed, something like asthma, you have 50% of people with asthma have no control. They don't know when they're going to deteriorate. And for children, it's an even more pressing challenge because there isn't an easy-to-use test for children to diagnose or management. And so what we looked at doing is using breath analysis. We didn't develop breath analysis. This was invented by Hippocrates in 400 BC, and he speculated you could diagnose the illness from smelling people's breath. So what we've done uniquely is we developed a point-of-care breath test, a device that's easy to use, carryable. You just breathe into it. And think of this like an alcohol test, but much more sensitive. And we collect the biomarkers, chemicals of disease in your breath, and we analyze that using AI to diagnose asthma and other respiratory diseases. And once you are diagnosed, you could take this device home. You could use it once a week. And it actually, by breathing in it, it can predict your deterioration in asthma and tell you that you might be having an asthma attack up to 3 to 4 days ahead. And then you have a preventive approach, looking at your action plan, which is on your phone, to stop you becoming ill. How does that sound?
Sounds amazing. Okay, let's also talk about, if we can talk about this issue, about the air pollution. This is a pressing issue around the world.
Yeah, so today, unfortunately, we live in many urban areas where the air pollution levels are very high, coming from car pollution, and also in your homes, the air pollution can be very high from everyday activities. And unfortunately, one of the challenges is that by being exposed to very high levels of pollution, which you are when you live in an urban centre, you can't see it. It's an invisible threat. So you're exposed to this, and unfortunately, this can lead to the development of respiratory conditions like asthma. And it's really important to identify what your asthma trigger is, whether it's air pollution, so you can try to carry out ways to avoid that or minimize your exposure to it.
Are there any other questions that I should have asked you?
Who's my favorite football team?
Let me guess.
It's Tottenham, I suppose. They're not doing so well at the moment. No, but seriously, I think what's interesting is that we do use artificial intelligence, machine learning. And how we use that is in the breath. There are lots of biomarkers. So all the chemicals from the breath, plus all the other physical information that you have when you exhale, that goes into a machine learning model. And it kind of identifies if you have that condition or not. And you can, so you can have a simple to use model, real time on the device. It's embedded in the device, so it's real time. You get, once you do the breath test, which takes 4 seconds, you get a real time answer, indication of asthma or not. And if you have, then you could go away and have more detailed lung function measurements. And for the management, it's just like a traffic light system on the mobile app. You breathe into the device. It looks for biomarkers for inflammation and indication of deterioration in your asthma. And then it gives you a risk score. Green, everything's fine. Amber, you look at your action plan and you look at a plan, a preventative approach to stop your developing an asthma attack. So our objective is to stop people from having asthma attacks and save lives.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victor.
Okay.